investigations, we have fraud. First of all, let's understand what is the difference between a fraud, and error, what is the nature of prevention and deduction, how we can investigate and how we should report, what are the fraud indicators we have, and what is the engagement procedure for the fraudulent activities. First of all, what are the effects of the fraud? Fraud always creates a monetary loss, but it creates a reputation loss as well, which is quite important for the organization. Because if people has to invest in your company and your management system is not that strong that people are doing fraudulent activity, so means the investor is not having confidence into the company, which is a big loss than to money they steal out of that, right? So monetary losses from fraud are significant, but in terms of time, productivity, reputation, this is the prime more important things. And we have to see what are the organizations should have a fraud program that include awareness, like how employees should know what are the fraudulent areas. It's like an awareness. Prevention, they should have preventive measures. That's why when we want to sell, we have a quotation, it is signed by a salesman, approved by someone, and then it can be processed further, right? And prevention detection programs, it also should have a fraud risk assessment process to identify the risk. What are the characteristics of the fraud? Fraud happens because of the pressures. These pressures or incentive is the need a person tries to satisfy by committing the fraud. Maybe you have some personal pressures. You took some loan, you invest here and there, you couldn't succeed. Now you have a pressure. So where to get the money? Only the company is the only place where you have a lot of cash. So you will try to play around and you will get the money, right? Some fraud are high-level fraud, managerial frauds. Some are transactional frauds. Accountant-level fraud. Some are managerial. Management try to get incentive, bonuses. They overstate the sales figure. Their fraud is different nature. The other fraud is different nature, right?
I've seen in one of the organizations before when I was auditing, the person who was handling the cash, petty cash, end of the month or end of the week, if you count, the cash is correct. But during the week or during the month, he rotates it.
Yes. This is again a technique like, you play with the cash. You use it for some purposes, then before month end or weekend, whatever the system is, he will fill out that.
But that again is a fraud.
It's a fraud, exactly, because he is using the cash for personal gains. Maybe you go to stock exchange in the morning, 5 days you play, and 6th day you sell and deposit the money, right? And this happen like senior level management. What they do is, you received some money from customer, you didn't book it in the bank, right? You keep it with you. You play, whenever there is audit and some activities coming, then you will do it, right? Customer has a confidence with you, he don't bother about this one, right? Opportunity is the ability to commit the fraud. Sometimes opportunity is very important thing. For example, if you don't have effective control systems, policies, procedure, people say no one take care. So let's play around. And rationalization is a person's ability to justify the fraud in his or her mind. Some people are so logical, convincing. If you even catch them, they will tell you, this is not a fraud, this is a practice here. We cannot do anything about this happening. So you get influenced about that one. So this is the ability of a guy to justify the fraud. There are common forms of fraud, like sometimes you pilferage the stamps, you put it here, paid, non-paid, or stealing merchandise to laptops, the inventory, staplers, stationery, papers, removing small amount of cash funds, failing to record sales, creating overages in cash funds registered by under recording, overloading expense account. Now, these are some general symptoms of the fraud. Responsibility for detection. Generally people confuse that it's a responsibility of the auditor to find out the fraudulent act. He says no, internal auditors are not responsible for detection of all the frauds, but they always must be alert to the possibility of fraud. Investigators are different. Your role as an auditor is to keep an eye on the system, and you bring efficiency, effectiveness. None of your work is going to create like a police role, right? Your work is more into add value, adherence to the controlling risk, governance, and risk assessment. You identify the risk, but in terms of fraudulent, fraud does not happen in the company. This is not your job, right? Internal audit responsibility for detecting fraud includes evaluating fraud indicators, like you use analytical procedures, and you feel your cost of goods sold is not right. So something happening in the inventory, right? Cash is not coming in a smooth way. All cash collections are not banked next day. These kind of things will be a fraud indicators. And deciding whether any additional action is necessary and whether an investigation should be recommended. The internal audit activity must evaluate the potential for the occurrence of fraud and how the organization manages fraud risks. Fraud investigation, first of all, an investigation gathers sufficient information, and it should disclose the full nature and extent of the fraud. Like what is the type of fraud, what is the nature of, how harmful this is, what is the severity. Internal auditor, lawyer and other specialists usually conducting a mutual investigation, because where the money fraud comes, then you have to hire some legal counselor. He will give you an expert opinion that what would be the punishment, which clause will be applicable on this one. And investigation and resolution activity must be in accordance with the local laws. Management develops control over the investigations. They include developing policies, preserving evidence, handling the results, reporting and communication. So again, to identify and to protect the company is the responsibility of the management. Putting internal control system is the responsibility of the management. Auditor is checking the compliance and where we are adhering, where we are not adhering, these things in general. A fraud-related interrogation differs significantly from a normal interview. Generally, you interview people and you ask certain things, but the fraud interview is little technical. So typically, the accused individual is interviewed after most applicable evidence has been obtained, and the investigator prefer to approach the accused with sufficient evidence that will support the goal to secure a confession. So once you catch the guy, you sit with him and you tell, look, this, your date, these are your signatures, and you have caught and there is no room out. Now it's a time you will confess, otherwise you will face the bad consequences. Generally, the accused is interviewed by two people. One is the experienced investigator and the other guy who is individual who take notes during the interview. And in addition, it is essential that all information obtained from the interview is rendered correctly. CAE is responsible for fraud reporting. This fraud has happened, this corrective action has been taken, this was the investigation procedures, which consist of various oral and written interim and final communication based on the type of the fraud, frequency, nature of the fraud. A formal communication may be issued at the conclusion. When it is concluded, so you will have a final outcomes. A draft of the proposed final communication should be submitted for the legal counsel, because it is a fraud. Fraud involves embezzlements, money loss and other factors. So first of all, you should discuss with the legal department that which clause applies to what is the consequences. Then